What's going on, everyone? So this will be the last video in the Firehawk series, mainly because I'm switching over from the Firehawk over to the Helix. Now I wanted to do a video not covering the different tones because I think that's been kind of beat to death, but I wanted to kind of cover a video as to why I switched from one platform to the other. Now this is something I've been kind of pondering over for the last couple months because I've had the Firehawk for about a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And the jump for me was, I think, at a timely manner. So what I wanted to do is kind of do a camera view of the two different platforms, explain the differences for those of you who are still using the Firehawk or older devices from Line 6 and wondering if you should switch over to the Helix. Now, I'm not going to mainly specifically point out the differences between the Stomp or the LT, mainly because I chose the floor, so that's what my whole concept's going to be behind. I also wanted to show a floor view of how I use the Helix because I think some people do jump into the floor and that's not the right suit for them. Some people might be the Helix Stomp, and for other people it might be the Helix effects, and for a different audience it might be for the LT. But for me, the floor is exactly what I wanted to look at. So let's switch views, let's go over the different platforms, and then we'll look at the pedal. Alright, so we have our two platforms set up. Firehawk is on the right, Helix is on the left. So let's go over the Firehawk real quick. So home buttons are on the bottom. You can go to settings, match a tone via MP3, go through your library, or edit. You have one guitar chain. You have the option of doing a Variax in or not. You have limited accessibility to what you can change in and out. So for example, in this particular patch is necessarily a hack patch, I guess. I have 4 effects on because the FX loop is out. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks I can change to a distortion, modulating, pitch, or a dynamic pedal. I have 1 amp, 1 cab, 1 mic, and that is the limit. I can't change any of these to a reverb. I only have 1 reverb. I have 1 EQ and 1 compression. With these effects, I am limited on where I can place them. It's either all before or all after the amp, and I cannot utilize and move the comp and EQ anywhere else than where it's already placed. As always, you can always change where you want these effects to go, which is a huge Line 6 win. Now, when we look over to Line 6 Helix, as you can see, there is a huge difference on how we can start routing these patches. So for example, if I wanted to start fresh, there is no template, there is no limitations on how I can build a tone in the Helix. You have a single path going left to right. You can navigate these to do a dual path down and dual path out again, up to 4 parallel or 2 parallel channels going outwards. One of the cool things I liked about this was the ability to have anything and everything loaded on this because we have 2 different DSP chips. So let's look at one tone I was creating. So when I first got the Helix, I was starting to basically try to copy the last patch I made. That was my patch that was kind of utilized for everything. What I quickly realized was the settings on my Firehawk does not easily transfer over to my Helix. It wasn't even close. Not to say that there is a quality difference, but there's such more in-depth detail into the software for the Helix that, you know, a 5.5 here is not really 5.5 over here. The upgraded quality of amps, different type of amps and effects was nice and refreshing. So one of the very first custom patches I built for myself was having a 3-channel patch. So a clean, a crunch, and a lead guitar amp. Now the difference between these two is that I have 1 preset, I have 1 setting. Now either I stack distortions or I do a tweak to one of my distortions and control the drive to pull that distortion back to have somewhat of a clean crunch sound. Whereas in the Helix, I really can instantly change those and stay within a preset. If I were to change presets on the Firehawk, it is noticeable. Not a huge difference, but to me it is. And so switching from, maybe an intro or a verse or a chorus, if this is on, you might get an error 21, which most Firehawk users have experienced. I experienced it on a weekend once while performing. If you don't have this on, you might have a little bit of a lag. So that's kind of a issue I kept running into over the last couple months that became really relevant. Whereas in the actual Helix, you can control multiple amps at a time, and if you really wanted to make this smooth within a preset, you can have snapshots and quickly change from one cleaned crunch to lead or lead with mod seamlessly with absolutely zero lag. And you can have some of these effects spill over into your switch so it's not a noticeable drop. So what I started doing was building basically what I usually use at all times, with the difference this time of utilizing IRs and splitting my chain into going into an IR cab and an actual line 6 cab, which was a huge difference in tone. So we can see that in the clean, I have one amp selected and a few amps on, or a few effects on. When I switch over, multiple items are turning on and off, which means I can focus on hitting one thing at a time while performing and focusing on what I'm playing. Whereas in the Firehawk, I kind of had to play tap dancer on multiple effects really quick. That's not always efficient. If we're to switch over again, we see that it ultimately switches over all settings at once, which is really, really nice. Over the last week, I've gotten really in depth on learning what the Firehawk wasn't able to do that I am now finding more and more resources in this Helix. So, for example, I re-edited this patch into this. Same setting, but I have two amps now, and the reason is I can have multiple functions edited on one foot switch. So let me explain. In my lead amp, I wanted to basically turn my lead amp, because I love the tone so much, into a crunch channel. So if you can see here, all the reds are items I haven't edited, but the white items are edits. What happens is in Snapshot 4, I have all these effects on and this amp. When I switch over to Snapshot 2, it takes the same amp and drops certain parameters down that I've preset to that foot switch and turns off effects at the same time. So I'm having multiple functions setting on one foot switch and changing everything I want to on one hit, which is absolutely amazing, and it makes performing so much easier. I mean, tweaking these on a platform like this at home, and making minor changes on at your performance or studios is a lot easier now. I quickly noticed that some of these amps have EQs within their own setting, and then I also started realizing that having a comp in the front, sometimes a EQ in the front, but more so an EQ in the back end, really pushed a lot of my tones that I was crafting that I was having issues starting to create in this platform. So one of the cool things that I liked about this setting that I realized today was the ability to make it a little more cooler. So one of the guitars I loved about their options and variety that provide to a player is the Variax, because you can do multiple tunings, multiple guitars, and it makes life really easy for carrying instruments off and on stage. Was the pitch control in this. So what I've set up on this new patch is the simple pitch, and I've edited the ability to do a half step down tuning and whole step down tuning. Now it does work polyphonic, so if you do single notes or chords, it transfers over really, really well. But for those who don't have a Variax and you want to experience that type of fun, not necessarily doing different mix tunings, but whole tunings, it makes life a lot easier. So now I'm able to do that on this platform, was something that was not possible on this. And I will say that the pitch and harmonic devices on these on this platform does, outweigh what they've loaded into the Firehawk. By far, they've come a long way with developing these tones. So these are the two platforms. Like I said, it's quite amazing when we look at uploading and downloading and sharing from the cloud. That kind of was a pain in the butt sometimes, to dragging and dropping and emailing tones to friends and other musicians to import into your device. And you could do multiple at a time and compress the files into zips, whereas you cannot export these to your computer. Once you lost them, they're gone. Or if you overwrote them, they're gone. These is a little more easier. Loading IRs into this is really easy. But I mean, I do love how they made this visually very interactive. It's kind of foolproof on how you can load things. The same way you can do the same thing on here. Tap tempo, snapshots, looking at your files, looking at what you're editing, and the chain is very nice. So let's switch over to the pedal, and let's look at that. All right, so this is my pedal board. And as you can see, this is something I built myself, but I have a couple things running here. Because I have multiple inputs for effects loops and guitars and stuff, I've set this up at my studio to run XLR out right to go to a certain channel, my 1/4 inch left to go to another channel, so I can basically reamp if I need to. But if I go to perform, I can do 1/4 inch or XLR out, so I just prefer to have it this way for myself. I have the G30 wireless feeding into my polytuner. Polytuner is running straight into the Helix. My sub and up is running on an effects loop number 1, so that's by itself. The Line 6 series from Mission Engineering, that is running to Expression Pedal 3. This is something I utilized from the Firehawk, and I absolutely love having a second pedal. Now I have 3, so 1 and 2 and 3, so it makes life a lot easier. But overall, this is a much more updated board. As you can see, I have protectors from a third party that built, some really durable screen protectors. These are about 1/4 inch thick, and they cover the entire screen for the display, my foot pedal, and my covers. And that's just in case something hits it. I'd rather break some plexiglass than break my screens. These functions, just like the Firehawk, whatever you touch, you see it edits real easy. The clicks and the LED lights have transferred over from that platform to this. The pedal is, in my opinion, super updated. This thing is like a freaking tank. It feels much smoother. I would think that there's a bigger range from what the Firehawk was to this. The click is a lot more durable, I would say. It kind of felt like I was ringing a doorbell on the Firehawk, whereas this thing, you're really, it's going to last me a while. When we look at the display, it is much like the HX Edit, with the difference being my effects and all the items are on my right side, presets are on my left, and I can edit and reorder anything just like the desktop version. The guitar chain is beautifully colored on a very large display. I can easily see my snapshots, my guitar chains, and my edits, and I can go through the pages here. So if we were to go to amp, we can go through the pages just like that. Switching options is the joystick. Changing items is just like that. Presets are right here. Now these is something that a lot of people don't want the scribble text or the scribble script. They kind of want it bland. I wanted the full version. I think if you're going to get a 4-wheeling Jeep, if you don't get 4x4, you know, one of those universals, and you just get a standard drive, I think you're missing the point of what the Helix can do. For my intents purposes, I didn't have a whole bunch of pedals. I had just the Firehawk and a couple other pedals that I wasn't too worried about. I wanted the ability to really see what was going on in multi-functions, aside from what was going on in display. So for me, I wanted these displays. What's cool is that I can change all of these into whatever I want. Some people, they have their presets on the top and they control their stops here. Other people have it with no presets. Some have all the stops going across, so they don't have the presets over here. They have to manually switch these. For me, I like having either all stomp or all presets, and I like having my presets here instead of banks. That's just my preference for the time being. So let's go over what I'm using currently. So, like I said, I prefer to use either stomp on or the snapshot view, mainly because I utilize a lot of snapshots. I do prefer to link up all my type of stomp box into channels that I'm going to be frequently using. So when I switch over to my snapshot, it's pretty easy. I'm pretty much big of a kid, and these little touch sensors are amazing. So if you touch it, it links over to all the items, and I'm not clicking anything. And they're easily changeable. And this is also how you would set up your presets to do multi-functions. When you go to snapshot, these are the same thing. Clicking on all the snapshots change everything. For me personally, I like to see the display and see what I have labeled for all of the items. The LT, I think, the pedal has had issues in the past with breaking and doesn't last. I don't like having to choose between my effect chain or display of text. I think these are nicely lit. They're large, and I know what the colors are. So for me, that's a personal preference. When I label these and color these, I kind of make it pretty simple. Cleans, when I do amps, I color code from yellow to red for type of amps. If I do pitch tuning, I always make them violet because violet is the color of that type of stomp. But I mean, just utilizing this thing is absolutely amazing. Switching for presets and patches and being able to customize things. If you were to go into parameters, we have our own EQ inside of the system. If we were to go further into the command center, I can utilize multiple functions to control MIDIs and all of that fun stuff. But I mean, everything that you could possibly think about editing on this, you can edit. You can tweak, you can do multiple functions, and you can control things that you can in the past that you just really haven't really ever thought of to make your tone absolutely phenomenal. So for me, I utilize every bit of this board between the scribble text, the snapshots, the amps, utilizing different types of controls. And for me, I'm trying to get away from maxing out the DSPs, but I know that going from one DSP chip to having two, I'm utilizing every bit of those power. So for me to go to something like the Helix Stomp, it's not feasible for me. I, as you can see, utilize every one of these buttons for most of my presets. Having 3 buttons just doesn't work for me. Because what I would plan to do is set this up much like I would for the controller on a Axe effect. So have one preset for a song, have an intro, a verse, a chorus, leads, outros, and really keep that song driven in a manner that makes it easier for me as a player to perform. And that's the whole purpose of having these displays and these many buttons. I think if you're somebody who kind of plugs in and plays, and that's all you do, you don't worry about effects and changing things dynamically, then great. I think the little stomp box is great. I think pedals are great. If you're looking for a super dynamic way to control a very complex, simple chain, this is the platform. At least in my personal opinion. All right, so here's my suggestion. Really look at what you want to do as far as being a player and kind of weigh out your options. I think there were a lot of people who jumped over to the Helix and you know, they enjoyed it, but maybe they got something way out of their, I would say, some comfort zone and some options that they didn't really need in the first place. And I think when you're paying, I think it's going for now $1,600 for a unit, that's a chunk of change that you may be just spending that you don't need, and you can invest in other ways. So what I would say is really pick your units very wisely in what you need. I've always kind of taken my time and utilized what I got for not only what I needed to at that moment, but maybe for a little bit later. What I realized with the Firehawk was, as great as it was for me and as big as of a jump it was, using wise, last 8 months it became an in-between unit, and that's when I realized that I'm kind of past the Firehawk stage and I needed something more professional for touring and more flexible for options for what I wanted to do, not only now but really in the future. And I knew what direction I was going in when I purchased this unit. I knew exactly what I wanted and what I didn't want when I got it. So I really would encourage people to kind of pay attention to yourselves, because there's a lot of people now selling the Line 6 floor unit and rack for the HX Stomp, and they're thinking that they can get one or two and basically supplement what the floor can do, and you're really missing the point. The Stomp was meant to be a small interface unit to sub into your enormous board of pedals. You know, and the idea was to keep evolving how you can use the Helix. The idea behind the rack was to take the floor model, put it into a rack system, and have the tones you want with maybe another controller. Maybe you don't need it. You know, the purpose behind the HX effects was not to have the amps, but have all of the different effects into it, incorporate in your board. So really, I mean, if you have invested a lot of money into your pedal board and you have all these pedals that you want to keep, as you can see, the Helix takes up big foot space on that board. So I know that I'm not getting any additional pedals. I'm not a big fan of having a whole bunch of pedals. I like having the options of switching them out. So having an HX edit, you know, and subbing these out is perfect for me. You're a brand new player and you don't have vast amount of experience in the digital modeling world. This is a huge jump. I've been dealing with digital units for the last 12 years. This was a bit of a jump and learning curve for me to figure out certain things and utilize it. So, I mean, there is a steep learning curve with this. If you're not used to making tones and editing them, and you like just, I want to purchase a tone and that's the patch, this may not be the unit for you, because just like any other unit, the factory presets are up to preference of whether they're good or not. When you buy a preset or an IR, and you hear them on you know, your speakers or whatever you're listening to, that's going to sound different from what they've used to what you're using now. So that's a whole different realm, and if you're not able to edit these tones, you're going to waste your money on this. When I bought the Firehawk, that was the realm of my budget at that point in time, and that was the best modeling unit that I wanted to go with because of the interfacing. Now that I've had the tablet feature and the screen, I kind of needed that still. That was kind of like my handicap, so having that on the Helix was a must at this point. If you're looking for, you know, definitely in the realm of touring, this thing is it. It is. It's stand, you know, the test of time for the last 2.5 years. High-name musicians are now taking it on board their performances, changing out their entire rig setup just for this thing. So it is now being tested through road use. You know, but for me, this is it. I don't see myself changing over the next couple of years. And I said that, you know, exact same thing with the Firehawk, but I knew when I bought the Firehawk that I traded the option of having dual chains and kind of editing a lot of that stuff when I bought it. And there was probably a small part of me that was kind of let down that I did that. And now that I've gotten that back with this pedal, I mean, they could stop editing all the tones at this point, and editing effects and giving us amps, and I have a crap ton. And really, if you can't make do with 164 amps and cabs and, you know, was it at 16 or 23 mics, I really don't know what to tell you. But let's bring this home. I highly encourage it. If you guys are, you know, if you've been using the Firehawk for a while and you want something more, and you are easy to develop tones and stuff, I think this is a great step. It is really, from the moment I unboxed it to using it, I mean, every day is absolute joy. I'm manipulating tones that, I mean, I didn't think was possible, making, you know, fantastic discoveries once I got out of the hole of the IRs and buying patches. If you just sit down and make a simple chain, you don't have to make them complex, it becomes even better. I think when people got way too involved, and I did too, making my guitar chains crazy. And I think if you just make them simple at first and you just work on them, it's a fantastic jump. But I highly recommend it. If you guys have any questions, please leave them below. I'm going to leave all these Firehawk videos still up, but I'm looking forward to making a whole new adventure with this platform, making cover videos, and then kind of go over my own tips that I'm discovering with this stuff now. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, like I said, post them below. Other than that, see you guys later.